These are constitutional rights that can't be just overridden.
Tonight, Indigenous leaders are laying priorities for the new Liberal government.
We're in 2025. We've never had an Indigenous premier.
A former chief in the Yukon is throwing her name into the ring to lead the territory's Liberal Party.
The task force will work collaboratively with the RCMP, GNWT, Department of Justice, and other federal and territorial counterparts.
And an emergency chiefs meeting in Yellowknife addresses an ever-growing drug crisis. Tanasa, good evening. TR Waitley na Tanasigaswin o Pasquayakuchi. Welcome to APTN National News. We start tonight in the nation's capital, where Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to unveil his new cabinet tomorrow. The ceremony is set to begin at 10:30. Carney has pledged to uphold gender parity. Some high-profile new MPs to watch out for include former advisor Tim Hodgson, Ecole Polytech shooting survivor Natalie Provo, former Quebec Finance Minister Carlos Leto, former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson, former Saskatchewan Minister and Métis citizen Buckley Belanger, as well as former broadcaster Evan Solomon. Staying in Ottawa, a group of Indigenous leaders held a press conference Monday morning laying out their priorities for the first 100 days of the new Liberal government under Mark Carney. The press conference was headed by Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Senator Paul Prosper, who released a document of 7 priorities, which includes investments in the Indigenous economy and housing, reintroduction of the First Nations Clean Water Act, and an external review of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Prosper was also asked about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's recent musings about a referendum on separation and how this could affect First Nations rights there.
There has to be a recognition as a precondition of the existing rights that, as National Chief has said, that that existed before the founding of this country. These are constitutional rights that can't be just overridden, for sake of a political stance.
A former chief of a First Nation in the Yukon is throwing her hat into the ring to lead the territory's Liberal Party. Doris Bill made the announcement in Whitehorse on Monday. Bill is the former chief of the Kwanlin Dun First Nation and previously worked as a journalist for the CBC. If she succeeds, she would become the territory's first Indigenous premier and the first person born in the territory to hold the role. Last week, Premier Raj Pillai announced he is stepping down as the party leader. Bill is the only person so far to put her name forward. The party will select its next leader on June 19th.
A lot of people are saying it's about time. We're in 2025. We've never had an Indigenous premier. And I think, there are those critics who say I'll focus only on Indigenous issues. I think my record speaks for itself. I have worked across party lines. I, even as chief, worked to build relationships. And I worked, there's a number of things that I did that the work was on behalf of all Yukoners. So I'm quite capable of doing the job, yeah.
The territory must hold an election on or before November 3rd. We want to hear what you think about the stories tonight on APTN. Here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to our website, aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow us at APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A new report suggests First Nation policing in Ontario is so chronically underfunded, it affects the mental health of police officers. The report released on Monday concludes that understaffing is to blame. At a Queen's Park press conference, Meredith Brown presented the report called Mental Health, Review of the Ontario First Nations Policing Agreement, Police Services. It found that OFNPA is so underfunded that it often leads to police officers working alone. Brown says a lack of resources has caused OFNPA members to suffer from post-traumatic stress at alarmingly high rates.
Put into numbers, 92% of OFNPA members that take a leave for psychological reasons remain off work for more than a year. This is a grim statistic. I make 14 recommendations in the review, but the common thread running through all is resources. Without adequate funding for staffing and administration, OFNPA officers will continue to police alone and will continue to suffer the harms that I detail in the report.
Advocacy groups stood with First Nation leaders at Queen's Park in Toronto during a press conference earlier today, voicing their concerns about the Ontario government's proposed Bill 5. It intends to create special economic zones. Critics say it will trample on Indigenous rights and environmental assessments to speed up approval of resource extraction projects. First Nation leaders from Neskantaga First Nation, the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians, Friends of the Attawapiskat River, Democracy Watch, and youth took turns at the podium. They're calling on the Ontario government to immediately pause the bill. They describe it as a dangerous attack on the environment and Indigenous rights. 14-year-old Bidabin from Neskantaga First Nation was emotional as she spoke on behalf of the youth. 70% of her community is currently evacuated due to flooding of the nursing station. As well, Neskantaga has been without clean drinking water for 30 years.
I don't want to lose the land. I don't want to lose what we have. We've come so far. And I'm afraid what's going to happen. Doug Ford, if you can hear me, if you're watching this, can't you see that this will hurt us a lot if you bulldoze what we have, if you take our land? You say that you're there for your country, but what about us?
Time now for a quick break. When we come back, we'll tell you about a battle that ended 140 years ago. Take a guess which one. Plus, we have this story from Bruce Dela Cruz.
For the 3 days that we gathered, we were looking for some kind of a sign for a hope. The people will feel hopeful that something will be done for young generations.
Welcome back. Today marks the 140th anniversary since the Battle of Batoche. The 4-day battle ended the Northwest Resistance of 1885, led by Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont. The battle took place May 7 to 12, 1885 at Batoche, Saskatchewan, where Métis forces fought to defend their land, rights, and way of life. The fighting started in Duck Lake, moved to Fish Creek, and ended in Batoche. Métis and First Nations fighters united against Canadian troops. After 4 days, the Métis-led forces ran out of ammunition and were eventually defeated. While no official events took place today, Métis Nation Saskatchewan says they are planning a 150th anniversary event with details to be announced at a later date. British Columbia has just announced a plan to recruit healthcare professionals from the United States to increase better healthcare in that province. At a press conference in Victoria, Premier David Eby says by creating a strategy to allow doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers to relocate to BC will help bolster the healthcare system. With a shortage of doctors and nurses causing temporary closures of many emergency rooms in rural parts of the province, the Premier says this is a perfect opportunity to help solve this critical issue.
By recruiting American healthcare workers into our system, they're able to hit the ground running with their experience in a system that's very similar to ours, and they'll help us in our goal of delivering more care to more British Columbians faster. Applications from U.S.-trained nurses to British Columbia are up 127%. 177 nurses have applied since the implementation of this new program, and 113 have been granted registrations already. Since March, just before the implementation of this new program, we've had 1,200 doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals that have expressed interest in working in British Columbia.
The Dene Nation recently held emergency meetings over 3 days in Yellowknife to address a steadily growing and sometimes fatal drug crisis in the Northwest Territories. APTN's Bruce Dela Cruz has more.
Dene Nation chiefs, elders, and members packed the Chateau Nova in Yellowknife this week for a forum on public safety. They discussed the growing drug crisis in the Northwest Territories and the best ways to combat it.
So for the 3 days that we gathered, we were looking for some kind of a sign for a hope. The people will feel hopeful that something will be done for young generations.
The Dene Nation declared a state of emergency in July 2024 because of a significant rise in drug-related deaths and incidents in their communities. According to territorial health officials, there were 31 opioid-related deaths in the Northwest Territories between 2016 and 2024. Several guest speakers were invited to speak at the forum. RCMP Superintendent Chris Romanchich discussed the creation of a top offender list to easier identify drug dealers. Dale Cox, former chief of police for Lakeshore Regional Police in Alberta, explained steps to introduce Indigenous policing. And brother and sister Dene lawyers, Shoshana and Sasha Paul, discussed banishment. By the third day, 13 resolutions on combating the drug crisis were unanimously approved. One of the hottest was a Dene Nation task force on drugs, alcohol, and crime prevention.
That the task force will work collaboratively with the RCMP, GNWT, Department of Justice, and other federal and territorial counterparts to advocate for solutions, policy changes that address the emerging needs of Dene communities. And
each First Nation will elect task force members, and the chiefs will figure out who pays for it.
Motion passed unanimously.
Another resolution was the creation of a Dene policing program. Dene National Chief George McKenzie called it, quote, a crucial step.
The RCMP, they are not our people overall. Because they're not our people, they don't understand our culture, our philosophy, our beliefs, and how we do things. So if we get Native policing, our own people, they will understand our society. And it stands to reason they will be more effective for enforcing the law for us.
Chief Mackenzie had a message for younger Dene Nation members.
We didn't forget about the young people, but this task force will plan it so young people can be a part of this gathering. Imagine every region has about 5 young people in the audience. It's going to look powerful. But we got to find the money and plan it well.
Tate Juniper of the Sawtoo is one of those young people.
It's time for our young people to be seen and to be heard. It's time for our leadership to make room for them at the table. It's time for our leadership to stop talking about having them represented and start allowing them to be represented in these discussions.
The conference was live streamed with over 40,000 views. They can be found on the Dene Nation's Facebook page at facebook.com/Dene Nation. Bruce De La Cruz, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Thanks, Bruce. Time now for one last break. When we return, Dennis Ward talks to a Métis gold hunter in search of $1 million. Stay tuned. Pitigwe, welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Dave Menzies caught a pelican in flight above the Red River near Steinbach, Manitoba. Dave tells us there was a rather large gathering of the big birds over the weekend. Thanks, Dave. Send those pictures to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now, let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. St. John's 5 degrees, Charlottetown 9. Kuujjuaq 5, Nain 4. Saguenay 12, Quebec City 17. North Bay 29, Peterborough 25. Big Trout Lake 19, Kapuskasing 29. Churchill 1, Puckatawagan 13. Barons River 17, Gimli 28. North Battleford 19, Regina 22. Uranium City 13, La Ronge 16. Fort Chipewyan 17, Peace River 23. Edmonton 21, Lethbridge 13. Quesnel 21, Kamloops 23. Dease Lake 9, Smithers 17. Old Crow -1, Mayo 10 degrees. Norman Wells 2, Fort Simpson 7. Tuktoyaktuk -10, Colville Lake -3. Cambridge Bay -7, Chesterfield -3. Arctic Bay -8, Igloolik -8. The quest to find $1 million worth of lost British gold coins meant to quell the Métis Red River resistance is the focus of a new show on APTN. Red River Gold follows 3 Métis treasure hunters as they travel the old Dawson Trail in search of the missing gold. For more on the show, here's Dennis Ward with Métis musician, entrepreneur, and treasure hunter Memphis Pambrin.
Memphis, thanks so much for being with us here. Can you give us a bit of a rundown about Red River Gold and the missing coins?
Red River Gold is a $2 million gold treasure hunt, pure and simple. And the reason the story is so important is during the late 1800s, during the colonial period when Canada's trying to move across Canada, and the British are supporting the changing government. In Rupert's Land, the Métis community in Louis Riel had a provisional government. But what happened was the colonialists didn't really like that the Métis were on that land, and they were having treaty with the First Nation groups. But when it came to the Métis, they said, well, listen, let's come up with a better idea to move you folks out of here. And because Louis Riel didn't seem overly receptive, they were shipping out 400 ounces of gold. And that gold was to pay the soldiers to put down Louis Riel and the Red River Resistance. And the story, the many stories that I'm finding along the way are soldiers who were carrying the gold, it went lost or missing. And not one gold sovereign has ever been found. It's never been reported. Therefore, as long as the Royal Mint is in belief, that gold is still out there. And that's the storytelling I want to share.
Well, that is quite a tale to share. Memphis, you're a musician, an entrepreneur. How did you get involved with this show?
So I had a podcast, did 100 episodes, and my goal was to try and interview people within all the Indigenous communities and people outside the Indigenous communities to have an understanding of building cultural relationships. And a friend of mine helped me take that podcast from a small little podcast to almost a variety show. And that director, his name was Saxon DeCock, and he's Métis, and he's an award-winning director. And as we were working together, we were doing research, he's doing research, and he said to me, Memphis, did you ever hear the story of the lost gold? And I said, growing up, these were tales that we were a little bit familiar with, but not something that I'd spent my youth suggesting that I had to do, but it was something in the back of my mind thinking, someday if I ever have the opportunity, I'd sure like to look for it. And then one day he called me up and he goes, do you want to search for that lost gold? And I said, I'll have my bags packed and I'll be ready to go in an hour.
Yeah,
I came to realize it doesn't work as easy as that, but here we are. It took some time, we filmed it, and now we're doing it.
Good stuff. I mean, aside from the search for the missing treasure, what was it like to travel down the old Dawson Trail?
As we're searching, and the path isn't as wide as people think. It's a wonderful historic path, and we understand this was the route that people were coming across Canada. And when we search, and we're searching riverbanks, we're searching along roadways, we're searching areas that you can see there was aspects of settlement, stopping areas. But the danger is when we get to the bog, the Caribou Bog. It's not the only one we search, but in our journey, we use underwater drones. We use the best metal detecting equipment there is out there. In fact, one of my search partners is Lori Goldie Gagne. She wrote the book on metal detecting. I needed to have the best around me for our best teams. But when we're on there, you'll see us and we journey as we meet people in every type of vehicle. And in fact, I even got a chance to ride in my first Red River cart.
Nice. Well, we won't, only one episode's aired so far, so we won't spoil the end, but how confident are you that you'll find the treasure?
Well, here's the thing. You know, when you think of some of the other gold hunting shows that are out there, I pull treasure out of the ground all the time. You would not believe the incredible finds that we have that prove just such an ancient history in our ancient history, a history of Canada along the route. But not to spoil anything, the part of the treasures that we pull out are those stories. And when we prove locations of buildings that have been talked about and shared, that's one of the most amazing things. And this is 13 episodes that are starting to play. And when people see all of the interviews that I participate in along the route, and the adventure and the danger that we sometimes face, that is part of the treasure that I get to share. It's amazing.
Well, Memphis, great idea for a show. Love everything about this. Can't wait to watch. Appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about it.
And folks, if you want to learn more, redrivergold.ca. And you can actually watch episode 1 coming out again on May the 12th, Monday, May the 12th at 10 a.m. And then the regular scheduled programming is back on at 7:30 p.m. on Monday. Thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you to all of your audience and all the listeners.
I have to agree with you, Memphis. Our Indigenous stories are definitely treasure. And best of luck trying to get that $1 million. Thanks to all our reporters, VJs, and camera folks for rounding up the news of the day for this Monday, May 12. From all of us, including our deadly studio crew, Egase, Gitam, Kawapa Mitinanaw. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Kristen and Dennis are back tomorrow.